Alright, welcome to the August update on the performance of the solar array that I've got. I hope you liked that little intro. I had a few requests from people to produce some videos and photos of the system which is installed, so I created that little montage for you. Alright, the headline for August is that we managed to bank £400 this month, so monetary value, that's really good. Although solar production hasn't been as great as the prior months. So stay tuned and I'll tell you how I managed to pull this off. First of all, the usual disclaimer, please pause the video and read it, but I am just sharing everything for educational purposes and you should get qualified advice if you're interested in any of this stuff. Alright, let's get straight into it. So the analytics performance for August. The solar array produced 794.2 kilowatts this month. We exported 17.4. We imported 33.5, meaning our house consumed 810.3 kilowatts in total. The month was pretty decent, but it doesn't compare to the really amazing months that we've had for June and July with pure blue skies pretty much every single day. Also coinciding with the summer solstice, so the sun is having its highest track through the sky, and it means that my system is affected the least by the various bits of shading that I've got going on. Now that we're into August, you can start to tell the difference that the sun is taking a slightly lower track through the sky. You can see that the shading is having a bit more of an impact, but more importantly, we didn't have pure blue sunshine on every single day. There were a few days with a few clouds rolling by, or it was kind of half overcast, and so we weren't generating as much as we would have liked. There's a few things to point out. So first of all, this day over here, the 11th of August, we actually came back the night before. I always plug in the car, except I haven't quite figured out with Hypervolt when it automatically starts charging and when it just stays on standby. So in this case, it plugged in to charge and it consumed everything I had left in the battery, completely drained it to zero. So then the following day, we ended up pulling a little bit from the grid in the early hours when the battery was on empty and the sun hadn't come up yet to take over. So we had a few kilowatts of inadvertent grid power there, which we wouldn't have otherwise needed. Then if I go forward a few days, on this day here, I think that's the 18th of August, we had to pull some power from the grid because the day before there wasn't enough solar production, and so the power that the array was generating was more or less just enough to get us through the day and barely charge the battery. So you can see before midnight we have a little bit of grid pull here because the battery had run out, and then through the night we had grid pull before we got to the following morning where it was a good day, and then the solar array took over enough to service our house and charge up the battery again to get us in the next few days. Same problem again over here on the 26th of August. So the day before, the solar production was low, it didn't charge up the battery enough and we had to pull from the grid before midnight, and then through the night we're pulling from the grid until again the solar array takes over when the sun comes up in the morning. Now what I've done is I've set my battery, my combined batteries, so remember this is the first full month that we've got the two batteries working together. I've told it that if the combined battery level reduces below 30% charge, then during the night, in those 4 hours that I've got on Octopus Go, charge up the battery to 30%. The reason for that is after 4:30, the 30% will keep me going until about 7 or 8 in the morning before there's enough solar production to take over. So that means where I know I'm going to have to draw power from the grid anyway, I may as well charge up the battery on the cheap tariff and then use that cheap power to get me through until when the solar panels take over. So that's what I've done now. I'll keep on tuning that number, that 30%, as we go forward, because as the solar production starts later and later, as the sun takes a lower track, and as the entire production for the day starts to not be enough, I'm going to have to rely on grid power more and more. So I'm going to tell the battery in those overnight hours, instead of having a baseline of 30, make it 40, 50, and eventually I'm going to get to the point where I have to tell it to fully charge to 100%, because I know I'm not going to have enough to get through the day. So I don't have to tinker with this that often. I've set it to 30%. I think that's going to last me for probably a month before I have to change it to 40%, something like that. The 30% at the moment is not taking me all the way down to 4 or 5%, which is effectively zero on the battery. I can't drain it below that. It kind of gets me to 10, 12%, but it gives me a little bit of a buffer, because if the next day is a bit gloomy and a bit rainy to start with, then I'm not going to have enough production. At least I can be using the battery on the cheap charge to keep me going. So it saves me having to tinker with it every day, basically. But anyway, this is the reason why we've had 3 days here with grid draw. The rest of the grid draw that you see here is just the usual give energy, pulling a little bit from the grid. So overall for the month, that is 96% energy independence. So if you compare it to previous months, we've managed to go up. And I think this is because we've put the second battery in. So we're really capturing everything and giving less back to the grid and making the most of the power that our system is producing. We have, during the month of August, we had maybe 2 or 3 or 4 days where we managed to max out the combined batteries, and then we still have a surplus. So then my Eddy takes over and my car charger takes over to top up the car. Now what I have noticed is before I was managing to top up the car and max out the car, where I literally had no more place to put all this power, and it was going back to the grid. And then I was just driving around in the car for the sake of it, just to use up a bit of charge so I can keep on topping it up. What I've noticed in the month of August is that we're putting less excess power into the Eddy to heat our hot water, and we are charging the car a lot less. The reason being is we managed to put it into the battery, and on the days where we use a lot of power, the next day sometimes there isn't enough solar surplus. So before, my solar surplus is when I top up an 8.2 kilowatt battery. Now my solar surplus is when I top up the combined 17.7 kilowatts. So sometimes there isn't enough solar surplus to charge a battery for 17 kilowatts plus service the house and then put any extra in the Eddy and the car. So basically we're charging the car a lot less in the month of August with free electricity, and we're diverting a bit less into the Eddy because more of it's now going into the battery. I mean, it works out and it makes sense to me because the cost of gas is the same as the cost of off-peak electricity. And so it doesn't matter to me if we're diverting electricity to do the hot water or we're using gas, because the price is 7.5p versus 7.34p. It's basically the same. It does matter about the car, but now I've got to be a bit more strategic about when I plan to use the car and when I'm going on longer journeys to make sure that I've got enough charge in there. And given that I don't have so much surplus where the car's always topped up, now I need to be thinking ahead to see if I need to top up from the grid overnight. So during this month, I haven't had to top up the car from the grid, apart from that one day where I made a mistake and put, 3-4 kilowatts in there. But you'll see when we come on to talk about September next month, that I've had to start pulling a lot of power from the grid. All right, so let's move forward then. So the best and the worst days. The best day was the 6th of August. You can see we had a really clean day here, produced 36.1 kilowatts. We did not pull any power from the grid overnight, and the battery serviced everything. So you can see there's absolutely nothing going on here in the early hours. And then again at the end of the night, when the sun's gone down, the battery took over and kept us going through all the night. We didn't have any blips where we were pulling power from the grid. During the course of the day, we managed to export 2.1 kilowatts back to the grid. So you can see those grey segments on the bottom of the bar here. Now, if I remember correctly, this is because I'd set my Eddy to have a 50 watt threshold before it starts to divert power. And the reason I did that is to make sure I give the battery a chance to top up first before the Eddy kicks in. What I did is I changed that setting somewhere during the month. I can't remember what day I did it on, and I changed it to 0. So basically, any time that the Eddy detects that we're exporting to the grid, it starts to divert to warm up the hot water. So that's why on this day we've got a bit of export. You'll see on other days we don't have that. But what I've noticed now is that the Eddy and the battery are sometimes competing, because the Eddy can basically divert instantly, whereas the battery takes about 10 seconds to ramp up. I'm now finding that the Eddy kicks in before the battery, and so the battery is taking longer to fill up. And if I look at the Eddy, I've put 2, 3, 4, 5 kilowatts in there some days, even though the battery is not full. So I've got to tinker with this a little bit more. I think I found a time delay, so I might go and, I thought I'd left that on 10 seconds, but I might go and look at those settings again and see if I can eliminate this or try and stop it competing with the battery. The worst day then was the 25th of August. So this I think was a bit gloomy, grey, overcast, whatever it was. We only produced 11.1 kilowatts during the day. Although the battery lasted us all night from the day before, we barely managed to put any surplus charge into the battery. So we got to what looks like about 10 p.m. and the battery had run out, and then we're pulling power from the grid for the rest of the evening and then all the way through the early hours the next day. If I move forward then and look at the lifetime performance of our array, so this is a new chart I introduced last month. The only thing I've changed here is this bottom right graph. I've replaced it from having a yearly or a lifetime chart just to the August one. So you can see we produced 794 kilowatts in the month of August, and you can see how each individual panel has contributed towards that. Remember, although I keep describing that my house points east and west, it's not exactly east and west. We're actually west southwest and east northeast. So my compass headings are here. 126 degrees is what I call the front of my house pointing east, and 306 degrees is the back of my house pointing west. So hopefully you can use that to compare to your house. If you have slightly more optimal angles, then you can kind of see what you might get in comparison. And I'm interested to know what you've actually got in comparison, so please do put some comments there. I want to know how much your array has managed to produce this month, and whether it's bigger or smaller than my array. Okay, if I talk about my household electricity consumption, so the bottom line is this month the house used 595 kilowatts. If I compare that to August of 2021, we used 510 kilowatts. So our house is using an extra 85 kilowatts of power during the month. We put 108 kilowatts of surplus solar into the eddy to heat our hot water. So that's instead of purchasing gas. And we only put 59 kilowatts into the car. As I said, we've got 2 batteries now, so there's less surplus to divert elsewhere. So only 59 in the car. So in total, we consumed 799 kilowatts here. If I move forward then and talk about our gas consumption, so overall we used 764 kilowatts of gas this month. Remember we have 2 supplies, so 373 on the main portion, 283 on the second portion, and then the orange segment here represents the 108 that we diverted from electricity to heat the hot water. So it's the equivalent of using 764 kilowatts of power. Compared to the August of last year, we have reduced our consumption by approximately 30%, but also our Tado system has been installed, so maybe this is now optimizing the amount of hot water, and it's not letting the heating turn on accidentally, or something like that. But anyway, with the current prices, this is good news. 30% off our gas bill roughly. In terms of the efficiency for the month of August, the 108 kilowatts that we have managed to divert is the equivalent of 14% of our gas bill being reduced by not having to purchase gas and using free kilowatts from solar power. Okay, looking at my energy, so this is just a chart of the 108 kilowatts that we diverted to heat hot water, and you can see what days we're putting it in. One thing I should point out is we've had our thermostat on our immersion heater repaired. So all this time, hot water in one of our tanks was being warmed, and neither the thermostat from the tank or the thermostat from the immersion heater was actually working. So anytime we diverted kilowatts here, it would just keep on going until the system was turned off. Now both thermostats have been replaced. What I'm noticing is that with very little being diverted, we end up finding that the first tank switches off and the power is being diverted to the second tank, as in implying that the water's already warm in there. So overall, we're probably putting less into the eddy than we had done in prior months because the thermostats are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then the surplus ends up going into the car instead. Anyway, you can see a chart here. You can see that on some days we've put in, the max 3 kilowatts. You can see again the grey and the kind of greeny teal colour representing the 2 different immersion heaters that we've got. And some days around over here we didn't divert anything because we're not producing enough. Okay, this is the really juicy chart for this month. So starting on the left, the month of August, we managed to consume 98% of everything we produced. So why is this a good thing? The more we consume, the less we give back to the grid. The less we give back to the grid, the more money we're saving, because it costs us more to purchase that energy than it does to sell it to them. So the more we manage to use somehow, the less we're buying at their more expensive rate. So 98% is fantastic. And even though we've produced less solar power for the month, we've managed to consume more. And I put this squarely down to having 2 batteries, because we don't have those moments where the battery's full and it's diverting elsewhere. We're putting more in the battery and then I can use it however I want. Basically, there's more efficiency in the system. So overall, that is good news. Looking across to the right-hand side, we've now smashed through another target. So remember, the installer said that in a 12-month period, our system would produce 4,916 kilowatts. Well, we've now produced 5,128. So 104% of their estimate. And we still have 2 full months to go and a bit more, 2 and a bit months. So anything we now produce beats their estimate. Second of all, they estimated that we would only consume 50% of whatever we produce. Well, our consumption is now at 98%, and overall it's almost matching our production estimate. So we've consumed 4,812 and the production estimate was 4,916. So we're almost there. And again, what that means is anything above what the installer estimated means we're reducing the payback period versus what the installer said. Okay, if we manage to produce more and therefore consume more than the installer said, again, we're reducing the payback period. So basically what I'm saying now is for the next 2 and a bit months, everything that we produce and consume is free versus what the installer predicted. Right? So bottom line, the next 2 months is what's going to lop chunks off the forecasted payback period compared to what the installer thinks. Now, why am I talking about all of this? Those of you who are interested in getting solar, you're going to go and approach an installer and they have to produce some documents which shows you the forecasted payback period. And you're probably going to get scared that, hey, I'm spending all this money. Everybody tells me payback is really like about 10 years, but the installer has said for my system, it's coming up at 18 to 20 years. Well, the installers have to be conservative. Supposedly that's a government mandate. So they're always going to downplay the capability of the system to you. And those are the metrics they're going to give you. The point of me telling you this is that we're blowing the installers' estimates out of the window. So when you see those estimates from the installer, you need to take it with a pinch of salt and understand that it's likely your system will perform much better. And if it's performing better, you're saving money quicker. So you're going to pay off the capital that you've outlaid to get this installed quicker, and therefore you're going to be saving money in the long run quicker. Hope that makes sense. So this is really, really, really good news for me that on both fronts now we've matched or beaten the installer's estimates. So the next 2.5 months are free. It's like buying car insurance where you pay for 10 months of insurance but you manage to get 1 year's no claims bonus. It's like the other 2 months are free. Okay, let's talk about peak power. So this month, like I said, is not as good as the previous month. So the average power was 3.8 kilowatts and the peak looks like it was just over 4, like 4.1, 4.2, something like that. We had a few days where the power production wasn't that high. And once again, I'm tracking the temperature, the peak temperature in my town every single day. And I can't really see the correlation yet. Right? The story here is supposed to be that the cooler the ambient temperature, the more efficient your panels will operate and therefore you'll make more power. I'm not seeing it yet, but I'll keep tracking like I keep on saying and see if we figure this out in time. Remember, the other thing is because all my panels don't face completely south, I'm never going to hit the max that my system is able to do, which is 7.3 kilowatts. And so I was interested to know, what is my system doing in comparison to that? Because I have to face east and west, and to put it short, basically only half my panels are ever kind of working their best every day. So I'm at 3.8. But I was having a discussion, I think, in the chat with another one of the viewers, and we were trying to find a way to extract the data from Enphase, because we're pretty sure that at moments in the day, some of the panels are maxing out in their capability, or some of the inverters are maxing out in their capability. So I was interested now to know on a per panel and per inverter level, because I have microinverters in my system, am I maxing out and getting clipping in some cases? Combined, I'm not getting clipping, but individually I might be. But I can't write the API to get all the raw data out of Enphase, so I'm not able to produce that. If anybody is willing to write the API for me, I would be very grateful. Okay, so if you are enjoying these videos, please consider subscribing or liking. It really helps me and it helps the YouTube algorithm put this content in front of somebody else. Okay, let's talk about energy independence. So in the month of August, we have managed to accomplish 96% independence. So again, really, really good. And you can see every day is basically green there. So even though we've had a few cloudy days and whatnot, we have managed to have extra power in the battery to more or less get us through, to really avoid having to pull from the grid. So the objective of putting the second battery in was exactly that, to avoid having to draw from the grid overnight and then sell it back to them during the day. Now that we've got a bigger battery, we can comfortably make it through the night, and that means we increase our energy independence. So the proof point is here. And whilst you might only consider that I'm accomplishing 1 or 2%, what we're going to start to notice is via some other calculations, as we put into the winter, where the solar panels really aren't doing much and only trickling in a few kilowatts, the fact that I can charge up both the batteries to the max on cheap power means we're going to be continuing to contribute to the payback of our overall system. So lifetime energy independence is currently on 81%. So I think this has gone up quite significantly in the last month. If I remember correctly, it was on 71 or 72% last month. So this is really, really good. And you can see the weight that the last 4 or 5 months have had, because the averages have been really, really high. It's really starting to offset those earlier months where the production was poor. But I expect this to settle on around 70% once we've completed a full 12-month period. Okay, and finally, let's talk about the payback curve. So the chart, as always, is the same. Like I said last month, I'll consider revamping all these metrics once we complete 12 months so that you can see some annualized numbers as well. So let's talk through what you see here. First of all, CapEx has remained the same this month, no more expenditure. Our lifetime solar savings are now on £1,300.53 and 24 pence. We have saved £570 worth of diesel. We have saved £57 worth of gas. We have made £1.65 by selling our surplus back to the grid. Our EV charging costs have gone up dramatically this month, so we've spent £57 in total to charge the car, and I'll explain why in a moment. So overall, our OPEX savings are £1,513, meaning that we have a balance of £19,690 to pay back to break even. We've paid back now 8.9% of our system, and I've had this just short of 10 months, and it means that the forecasted payback with the new battery added on is 9 years and 1 month. So even though I've dropped another £4,000 or just short of £4,000 to get a second battery in the last month, so it hasn't even had long to kind of contribute, it still managed to get our forecasted payback in the window I said it would always be. And I've always said it's going to be somewhere between 7 and 11 years, if I remember correctly. So we're bang in the middle right now. So really, really good news. All right, let's look at the August column then and go through all the numbers. So as I said before, the system has produced 794 kilowatts of solar production. We have exported 32 kilowatts this month, meaning that our house actually consumed 762 kilowatts generated from our solar array. Enphase thinks I imported 33.5 kilowatts from the grid. My supplier, based on my meter readings, says I imported 37 kilowatts. So a small discrepancy there. Overall consumption in the house was 810 kilowatts. So 108 kilowatts was by the eddy to heat hot water. 59 was by the car, according to my Hypervolt app, which means that the house actually consumed 595 kilowatts on a like-for-like basis. So if I didn't have any of this equipment, if I wasn't able to divert and consume extra kilowatts, if I didn't have the electric car, my house would have consumed 595 kilowatts this month. From a gas point of view, we've consumed 764 kilowatts. According to the supplier, we've consumed 655 kilowatts. CapEx, as I said, has remained the same. The unit rates for electricity has stayed the same. And actually, I need to make a correction here. It's 4.1 pence, including VAT, that they provide us on the SEG, not 4.5. The numbers I've calculated down here are correct. It's just I've put the wrong rate, so I'll fix that for next month. So solar savings this month. So basically, the 762 kilowatts that we consumed direct from our solar panels into our house has saved us £234.99. That's how much we would have had to pay the grid this month if we had purchased this electricity from them. Diverting solar power to heat our hot water has saved us £7.90 of gas this month. I've saved £214 of diesel, which is quite a lot, and it's significantly more than the prior months. So basically, I went on a kind of long drive for the bank holiday weekend. I needed more than a full charge of the car, so I've saved that much money, because if I had otherwise bought diesel during the course of the month, I would have spent 200 and whatever pounds on it, which I then banked. It is offset, and I'll come to the EV charging costs in a moment, but first of all, we've made £1.31 this month by diverting 32 kilowatts of surplus solar into the grid. So as I've been saying the whole time, if you have the idea that you're going to get a solar array installed and divert all your power into the grid and make money from it, you're really not going to make money. They only pay you 4.1 pence, and I'm on Octopus, and at the time I switched, Octopus were providing the best export rate compared to all of the competition. If you have import and export preferential rates, you can only kind of benefit from one of them. So I benefit on Octopus Go for import, and I suffer on Octopus Outgoing for my export. But anyway, at the moment I get paid 4.1 pence for everything I export, and they charge me either 7.5 for my import overnight or 31 pence for my import during the day. So let's take it at peak rate, because if you don't have any of this stuff, you're probably on a flat rate tariff and not on Octopus Go. So you'd be paying about 30p a unit versus 5p a unit. So I'm receiving a sixth of what they charge me. So that I'm receiving about 16-17% of what they charge me. So it really isn't worth having all of this equipment just to export. You really need to use all the power that you're generating, and if you've really got nowhere else to store it or use it, then you export it and make the peanuts that they're going to provide you. Okay, so we made £1.31 by selling our surplus back to the grid, and then we've actually spent £47.58 to charge the car. Now, why is it so much? First of all, we had those few kilowatts that we imported from the grid by mistake early in August, so I've added on whatever that cost. The remainder is actually using a public charging point to charge the car. Now, since we've got this car, I've always charged it for free at home. This is the first time that we've had to use a public charging point to charge up the car. So I hadn't really thought about this properly until after I'd used the public charging point, but I was trying to divert the surplus solar and drain out the battery to charge the car. I couldn't get it to full, so I went away on my journey with a car on 30%, and then when it ran out, I stopped at the services and used the ultra rapid 125 kilowatt chargers to charge up the car. The thing is, the cost of those units, I stopped at Shell and BP. The Shell one, it advertises about 75 pence per kilowatt, but they only charged me about 59 pence per kilowatt. That's what's come through on the little statement that I've got. I also stopped at BP, and they charged like 52p a kilowatt, or the service station I went to, that was their charge. So I stopped 3 times in the end, not because I charged it to full, but just to do a tactical charge to get me to where I needed to go to without having to hang around too long. That all came to the £47. Now, in hindsight, when you think about this, paying 52p or paying 70p for a unit of electricity versus either charging it from home for free via solar power or charging it for cheap overnight on your Octopus Go rate at 7.5 pence is cheaper than paying 50p or 70p from a service station. Now, in my case, I was trying to use free electricity to charge up the car, which I didn't have enough of. And stupidly, I thought, well, okay, I'll just get the rest from a service station. What I should have actually done is charge the car from home regardless, because even if I'm charging the car at peak rate at 30p a unit, it's still cheaper than the 50 or the 70p I ended up paying at the service station. So it was a learning experience. I know for next time now that if I've got a long journey, even if I can't charge the car at home for free, charge it at home regardless, because it's still way cheaper than using a public charging point. The only time you really want to use these public charging points is if you're kind of going to Tesco, for example, where they currently give you free EV charging. The thing is, it's limited to a slow charger, so you're not going to be able to top up your car quick. It's just going to trickle in a few kilowatts while you go and do your groceries. It's the ultra rapid chargers that you're finding at service stations, which are the ones which you can tolerate sitting there for 10-15 minutes, or by the time you use the services, you've got enough power in your car to keep going. So anyway, it was a learning experience. I know for next time, if I'm going away, just charge the car at home regardless of whether it's free, cheap rate, peak rate, because it's all cheaper than using a public charging point. Of course, this only works if you can complete your journey within the range that your car can do. If you have a long journey that you're doing where it's inevitable to use a public charging point, then the best you can do is just put in the minimum that you need from the public charging point to get you to your destination. And then if you charge from home, even with the kind of slow charger that the car comes with, it's still cheaper than using a public charging point. So anyway, although we saved £214 by not buying diesel, we spent £47 purchasing kilowatts to go into the car. So the grand total of all of this means that we have saved £411.19 this month. That is by using free electricity to drive our house, charge the battery, warm our hot water, diverting whatever we could into the car and not buying diesel. £411. So although our solar production for the month of August is over 100 kilowatts shy of what we've accomplished in previous months, we've actually managed to save more money this month, and a big contributing factor is what you see here. We have bought less diesel at today's prices and managed to use the electric car, which is saving us loads of money, and that is despite having to purchase expensive kilowatts from a public station. So that means in total across the lifetime we have now saved £1,925. We have a balance of £19,690 to go to break even. So our payback is 8.9%, and it's going to take us 9 years and 1 month to pay off the system. Remember, this is a linear extrapolation, so it's going to fluctuate, but I expected it to land around this number, so we're kind of there. And our energy independence, as you know, is 96%. You can see in the background now, while the chart's not that exciting, you can see all the lines are starting to fan away from each other, where they're kind of making a contribution. The game plan here is we need to get these lines to catch up with this yellow line way up here, which is our OPEX. When these lines overtake the yellow line, that's when we're saving money and kind of making money effectively. So I'll reconfigure the chart to get a total on here, because these are all independent based on this is what the solar did, this is what the eddy did, this is what the diesel savings were, so on and so on. But the cumulative total I don't think is in here, and that's the one that we care about, catching up with this line. Alright, so the last thing to mention though is if you're interested in switching to Octopus, have a real hard think, because whilst the prices are high, they're about to get higher going into the winter. So now is a very good time to lock in your rate. Looking at Octopus's website, they have got a message on there today saying they still haven't reacted to the new higher prices that have been announced by Ofgem, the new revised price cap. So they're still advertising their old prices. It's going to be imminent when they change their tariffs. So literally, if you're watching this video, you've got, zero time, like 1 or 2 or 3 days at most, I would imagine, to try and get in there and secure their better rates before they put their rates up. And then we're really stuck going into the winter. So if you're struggling to understand, in my view, the advantages of switching to a company like Octopus, where their tariffs are smart, is whether you do or don't have solar power or battery or an EV, they still allow you to switch to their smart tariffs like Octopus Go. And it means that you can benefit from cheap electricity for those overnight hours. Even though you only pull 1 or 2 kilowatts in those overnight hours, purchasing those at 7.5 pence versus purchasing them at 30 pence, the saving that you make offsets the additional cost of a peak time unit. So what I mean is the normal daytime rate on Octopus might be 29 pence, but on Octopus Go they charge you 31 pence because their evening rate is cheap. The units that you buy at the more expensive rate, when you work out this total at the end of the day, it's still cheaper when you don't have any of this equipment to be on Octopus Go. I've got another property and that's exactly what I do. I have no battery, no EV, no solar power, but I'm on Octopus Go, and the 1 or 2 units I pull overnight, they save me money, even though I'm paying a bit more for the units during the day. Those of you who have any of this equipment, it's a no-brainer, particularly if anyone's got a battery. You want to be on a smart tariff like Octopus Go, because what you can do is in the winter months, charge it up and then use that electricity you've purchased on the cheap to keep your house running during the day. So if you're on the same tariff as me, you end up paying 7.5 pence for a unit of electricity instead of 30 pence. You can get your battery to discharge the cheap electricity you bought overnight instead of purchasing it at that moment when you need it at 30 pence. So this, doing simple maths, if you just did that and nothing else, it's going to quarter your electricity bill, right? Because 7.5 pence is about a quarter of 30 pence. So your electricity bill is going to get quartered just like that if you did nothing but get a battery and switch to the Octopus Go tariff. So if you're interested in switching, I'll flash on the screen my referral code. If you use that, then you will get £50 credit as a thank you, and so will I, direct from Octopus in your first bill. If their website doesn't allow you to switch, so that URL on the screen doesn't work, you can give Octopus a call on their phone number. You can still do the switch. They just like to speak to you to make sure you understand that the prices are high, etc. And you can use that reference number there on the screen, which will also enable you to get the £50 discount applied to your account. All right, fantastic. Well, this is this month's review. I'm looking forward to your comments and questions. Please do post how your array has performed. I'm interested to compare. And if you've got any suggestions or questions you want to ask me, go ahead and I'll do my best to respond.